I'd like to call the, we opened a public meeting and recessed right away for an executive session, and we'd like to now close that executive session and reopen the public meeting for the Port Commission for March 3rd, 2015. The first order of business is the roll call, and all, let the record show all the commissioners are present. And for the public comment period, please state your name and address at the start of your comment. And our first person is Mark, is it Lowry? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mark Lowry. I represent Labor, and I represent of Whatcom County. And I'm here basically just to express disappointment and dismay regarding the recent actions of this port in respect to the Whatcom waterway. We were told, and we've read, and we've heard the assurances for the years going forward that we were going to redevelop this waterfront in such a way as to maximize living wage jobs with a preference for marine-dependent industry. And as we look forward to pushing this redevelopment out into the log pond area in particular, where the opportunity for real numbers of living wage jobs exist, we view the prejudicial decisions that were made that hamper our ability to move freight in and out of the barge dock as harbingers of things to come that are not very encouraging. For those of us that represent working people, the ability to work in an active working port is absolutely critical. We understand the obligations of operating a port, and that to us is not just an airport, it is a working waterfront. So as we take the decisions that need to be taken for environmental remediation and for reclamation and for the eventual redevelopment of the areas in the Bellingham waterfront that hold the potential for great jobs, if we continue to make decisions that undermine the potential for those great jobs, there are many of us in the community that will rise up in vocal opposition and push back. We will be watching the proceedings very, very carefully. This entire community has an immense stake in what happens here, and we are certainly hopeful for more encouraging outcomes than where we have begun. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment period, Lori Province.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission. Mr. Chairman, I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Lori Province. I live at 2501 West Street, so I've been adjacent to the waterfront for the last 35 years that I've lived in my home. I am using the public comment period because I've spent more time than the average citizen maybe in the last week on your website trying to really become familiar with it so that I would be able to find things on my own without having to make queries and et cetera on just basic knowledge things from staff, because I really don't want to put a burden of wasting time on staff. One of the things that I did discover, and I thought might be, I share this with you, full disclosure, I'm also a port tenant because I use the, what do you call it, Commissioner? the RV for boats. I'm a boat tenant in Squalicum Harbor. So full disclosure, I am a tenant. But one of the things that I did notice that I thought might be helpful to an incidental person who is coming to your website to see what is happening with the port. One of the things that was very proudly pronounced and quite widely acclaimed was the master plan agreement with the city, when all of those documents were finally approved and everything. And in the ensuing, it's been about, what, 14, 15 months since then. It would really be an asset to the public if they were made aware in the 12 months since then what has happened. In the timeline moving forward, what has happened since that period to move forward on the redevelopment of the waterfront. I give you that as something that might not take a lot of effort, but would be a very productive and helpful thing for citizens who use your website to see what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Any comments or questions? That's it for our public comment. Was there anyone that didn't get a chance to sign up?
Excuse me, Commissioner.
Yes.
We have an email received today for public comment entered by Matt Pascas, subject Painfield. And I'll pass it on to you.
Okay, is there, that's it. Okay, thank you very much. We don't have a consent agenda today, so we'll move right into our action items. And our first action item is the approval of the minutes of the, I guess you need to read those, I'm sorry.
A motion to approve the minutes of the Port of Bellingham Commission meeting held Tuesday, February 17, 2015.
Thank you, Diane. Any,
I don't have any, no.
okay, all those in favor? Aye. Passes 3-0. Our second administrative action item.
Authorize the executive director to execute a personal services agreement with VPCI and Cities Digital in the amount of $69,318 plus a contingency amount of $6,000 for a total available contract amount of $75,318 for the installation and maintenance of Laserfish electronic records management software.
Thank you, Diane.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Amy Settles, Public Records Officer. I'm going to speak on this today. Before you today is a revision on the agenda packet that you received. There's some changes that were made in the meantime. The changes consist of different terminology and some added contract numbers, which I felt were more helpful to give you a better idea what we're asking for. In January, the Port issued a request for qualifications for the installation and implementation of the Laserfish software repository. We received 2 responses, and the evaluation committee selected VPCI and Cities Digital as the vendor most responsive to the needs of the Port as far as records management. This is fully budgeted in the 2015 capital budget. And just kind of as a side note, another thing, they represent the city of Blaine, Whatcom, and Skagit County agencies as well. So I feel that they're a very well-rounded agency located in Seattle that can better serve our records management needs. Any questions?
Any questions, Commissioner? No questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Our next action item is environmental.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute an amendment to the agreed order for the Harris Avenue Shipyard site with the Department of Ecology to include performance of an interaction item pending public comment.
And good morning, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm John Hergesheimer, Senior Project Engineer for the Port, and I'm presenting this in with the absence of Mike Stoner today. And I'm the engineer who's working on the Harris Avenue Pier construction side, and obviously Mike is working on the cleanup portion of this joint project. So I'd like to present a few items to you in response or in follow-up to the motion that is for an interim action proposal to be submitted to Ecology for their acceptance for creating a subparcel to the overall cleanup of the Harris Avenue shipyard site in order to provide early action cleanup at the site and take advantage of the need to replace the pier. So the site is here shown in the small map. It's at the Bellingham Shipyard, 201 Harris Avenue in Fairhaven section. More close-up view is you see the shipyard areas. That's the Faithful Servant that's attached to the concrete portion of the Harris Avenue Pier. The wood portion of the pier is right in that area. Just to the south of it, connects to the land. And connected with that then is the landward upland cleanup of the portion of the site. So here's another map showing in blue the proposed interim action, phase one, if you will, of the whole cleanup. The black boundary is the entire site of the shipyard Matka cleanup site that's been identified. Includes both the Puglia shipyard area and the All-American lease area as well. The blue area, again, is the section that's looking at being cleaned up, and it includes both sides of the pier for the water portion, and includes the demolition replacement of the pier, and the carpenter shop will be demoed and not replaced, and its pier as well removed and not replaced. The purpose is to provide a more certain cleanup versus trying to clean up underneath existing structures and or provide caps. This interim action will then provide a full cleanup opportunity for that area. So the proposed interim action under MACA allows, the interim action section under MACA allows this to occur in order to break a large site up into several sections for both ease of biting off the area in chunks that are more easily remediated in a shorter time frame, and provides much less impact to the tenants than doing the whole thing at one time. So a JARP application was submitted December 8th of 2014. Supplemental sampling of the site occurred in February of this year to get the last of the information needed to do the final cleanup design. The draft amendment to agreed order, would be happening upon, if you authorize this interim action, then the agreed order amendment would go forth that allows then this interim action to occur under the amended agreed order. And we're on a parallel track for ecology with the public comment period for both the agreed order and SEPA occurring concurrently, which includes the interim action and the interim action work plan. The interim action work plan identifies in detail the exact work to be done in that area. This is just a view of a couple of facility conditions that we have. We have bracing. You see the non-existent bracing. This is quite evident and quite universal throughout the pier section. Here's a section of this. This is very typical of a portion of a concrete or a timber creosote treated piling that's has about maybe less than 50% of its potential bearing capacity left. The proposed this interim action was proposed following the condition survey of the pier. When we looked at the pier, we saw evidence that it was deteriorating rather rapidly not just the piling, but timber sections of the deck were in great distress. And that timber section of the deck is what is used by the shipyard, obviously, to get men and equipment, materials and equipment across into the concrete portion of the pier. That's a deep water section for repair of their vessels that they have under contract. So then the RIFS, the preliminary work on the RIFS, remedial investigation feasibility study, has been ongoing since about 2010. And so we are well placed timing-wise to then look to do an interim with the condition of the pier being what it was, the status of the RIFS being where it was at, to know how to do the cleanup and what to recommend to ecology for the cleanup, and to get their provisional approval on that. So then the environmental benefits of this project is, as I said before, removing the piers first will allow complete removal of the contamination down to cleanup levels of the entire site underneath the pier and underneath the carpenter shop pier. And it's also an early source of control of creosote into the water system. It's a source control because we'll be removing all the creosote timbers, and both piers, the carpenter shop pier and the main pier, are all creosote treated timber, as well as some other ancillary facilities that will be removed in order to actually have the room to get the equipment in to do the cleanup at the site. And then there's also a significant reduction in the overwater coverage, so we don't have to incur mitigation costs to do this project that could be quite expensive, and that being the fact that we're taking down the carpenter shop and its pier and not replacing it. The environmental cleanup is two phases, or two items of work, two major elements of work that are being performed at the same time. One is the excavation of the upland area to remove arsenic, copper, and zinc from contact with human contact, and that will be removing the top layers and replacing it with clean gravels. And there's also a leaking, or former leaking, petroleum tank that needs to have the soil underneath it excavated and removed. And that needs to be done at the same time as the in-water cleanup, because ecology requires source control to occur at the same time or ahead of the in-water sediment cleanup, obviously to keep from contaminating new sediment areas that are remediated. Then the upland area needs to be cleaned up as well. And so then in the in-water, we have removal of the marine sediments. And again, that's arsenic, copper, zinc, the normal cast of characters that you see in shipyards, as well as the creosote-related contaminants. So the components of the interim action, as I stated before, is demolition of the old wooden creosote structures, and that's being done first, and then perform full dredge in the sediment area underneath those structures and alongside the structures. The targeted excavation of upland soils, again, this is very strategic, keeping in mind the Puglia shipyard is operating on a daily basis in the area. The intent is to clean up the areas that need to be cleaned up in a more surgical manner, so we don't shut down or severely curtail the shipyard operations in any of those areas. So that basically means we're going to remove shallow metal contaminants and put back clean gravel, and removing the TPH contaminated soil underneath the tank, the AST tank, and that's about 12-foot depth. Yes, sir.
Just curious about creosote and timbers, or on pilings, when they're, whatever the word is, impregnated with creosote way back when, how long does that continue to be a problem? I mean, roughly speaking, in a normal situation out here, years and years, tens of years?
Well, the creosote in the piling and the timbers, obviously, it's quite long-lasting material, so it never washes out, it never degrades significantly. So the only way to control the source is to remove the source, which is the timbers that have been creosote treated.
So it just continuously through its lifetime till it rots away? Is that what you're saying, in a natural environment?
Correct. The only solution has been shown to be removal of the material, or burying it to, if there, for instance, if there's pile stubs that cannot be pulled, they break off, then you cut them off at mudline and cap over the top to keep the benthic organisms, the life in the ocean basically away from that material, so they cannot contact it. And then finally, then rebuild, the last item of this, after all the excavation is done in the waterway, is to rebuild the main pier. And there are 2 walkways that are going to get removed in the project, and they abut both sides of the marine railway. They need to be removed. One of them is attached and actually is part of the carpenter shop pier, so that'll go away when the pier goes away. The other one is the West Marine Railway, and that needs to be removed in order to provide access space for the large equipment that needs to come in by water and do dredging, do pile driving, that sort of operation. So that will be removed. It's a catwalk, about 2 feet wide. That'll be removed and replaced with modern galvanized material, steel structure. So the estimated cost of this total project is $14 million, and that's the cleanup and the structure, demo, and replacement. Sources of funding are listed there. The MACA State Grant, the Environmental Reserve Fund of the Port, the Real Estate Fund of the Port, and there is a future PLP cost share on this project as well. So again, there's the site. The site in blue is what we're looking for approval for the interim action as a portion of the larger site in black. And so the next steps then is the draft agreed order amendment. Public comment period by ecology would happen upon authorization of this document that's before you today. That would be done, as I say, concurrently with SEPA to be on schedule to not delay the proposed start date for the pier construction this year. Permit approvals, the permits have been submitted and are pending. We hope to get those in the same time frame as the ecology agreed order amendment process is completed and the SEPA process is completed. So the interim action schedule then is to begin construction in the upland area in July of 2015. The in-water portion would happen beginning August 1st through February 15th for the in-water portion, and then areas that are not done in that time frame that need more in-water work would have to carry over until the next year, the next August and September of 2016. And that currently amounts to some fender piling along the newly constructed pier, reconstructed pier. And the future market cleanup phases are yet to be determined. The whole site is still going through the final RIFS process. This interim action then allows us to carve out this project and then going forward, the final solution on the rest of the site would be determined, and the phasing for that would be determined as well in the future. That concludes my comments. Any questions?
Thank you, John. The total cost of the project will be well over $14 million then, when the whole project's completed?
Yes. This is just the interim action is, for this phase, is $14 million. So there's more in-water cleanup to be done, more upland cleanup to be done. So basically, we're doing potentially about a third of the site.
About what?
About 1/3 of the site with this interim action. It varies because there may be more sediment remediated in the next phases and less upland, or vice versa.
Any questions, Commissioner McCall? Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Next item is under facilities. If you could please read the action item.
Authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement with Wilson Engineering LLC to provide surveying services for the Waterfront District development in the amount of $26,318, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized amount of $29,000.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Adam Fulton. I'm a senior project engineer at the Port of Bellingham. This is to get approval to hire a surveyor, to do our general binding site plan. Binding site plans are required. They're one mechanism to identify properties that you could then sell. The general binding site plan process has two steps. The first is the general, and that is to define the perimeter of the property being at hand, being talked about, and that in our case, is basically this first stage of the property. And so that's that property there with that heavy line, not the one I drew, but the heavier line, you'll notice, is what we'd include in this general binding site plan. The second step are what we call specific binding site plans. And those you do several times throughout the life of the property, as long as you're selling portions of it off. And our immediate assignment is to define the perimeter of the property, i.e. the general binding site plan. And then the commission will see forthcoming amendments to this PSA that will be, as we do more and more specific binding site plans, identifying more and more parcels to be sold. We can't do those right away because they are reflective and responsive to the tenant or the buyer of the property. So those will take shape as we develop this property over the next few decades. Do the commissioners have any questions?
I do. So, Adam, there's the heavy green line that you referred to, and just at that area, I've actually got two questions, but the first one being just that purple box in the lower right corner says 6.69 acres. Mm-hmm. All right, there's a line, that heavy green line goes across, I guess, to the southeast, over to Cornwall, up around and all of that. In between, though, going to the northeast, there's a section of the railroad that crosses this particular area. Is this section of?
Is the commissioner talking
no,
about?
Further down. You see how the line goes around the railroad? I'm wondering about ownership between the bottom of your circle and that where it says 6.69 acres, where the railroad crosses, but it's down in that area, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if I could invite Sylvia Goodwin, our Director of Planning, to discuss the specifics of property ownership in the area.
The portion, Sylvia Goodwin, Port Planning, the portion that is circled on this one, can't touch it. That is a right-of-way, so the Burlington Northern owns that. Mm-hmm. The other part that you were asking about is a lease. It is a easement. So if and when the railroad moves, that property will come back to the port. The other property, the northerly port, will have to do some type of a trade because Burlington owns that. So it's just a difference between ownership and an easement.
Okay. And then the second question is the purple box, I'm assuming that's Western Crossing. I seem to recall that being closer to the water than it's shown on this image. Is my memory being
no, that's where it always is. The purple is the zoning of the county, of the city, the institutional mixed-use zoning, and that is the 6 acres where it's been. I think it looks a little different because the park, it doesn't show green here.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions, Mark?
Are you all done, Adam? Or is it just questions for that part?
Any other questions for Sylvia?
I can field any questions, Commissioner.
No, that's it. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Did you have any other comments?
No, not unless the commissioners have questions.
Jim, did you have any questions? I have none. Thank you. This is $150,000 in the budget, right? Correct. Okay. I have no further questions. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you again, Adam. Our next action item is in planning and economic development.
A commission motion authorizing $80,000 of small city economic development funds for projects in the cities of Blaine, Everson, Ferndale, and Linden in the amount of $20,000 each.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dodd Snodgrass, Economic Development Specialist for the Port. Before we get to the motion, I'm going to provide a overview of the Small City Economic Development Fund. Oops. This was a program that started in 2004. We've had the Small City Partnership for a number of years, which is a monthly meeting of the small cities and discussion of topics of interest. And it was decided to grow a program that we could create a cost-sharing mechanism with the cities, the small cities specifically, on capital projects tied to economic development. We're not investing in construction, but planning, engineering, and feasibility type of work. And then the objective is to help leverage funds to complete those projects. Since we've started the program, it's about average of $20,000 approved per project. As far as completed projects, about $13,500 per awardee. We have $80,000 to distribute this year. Last few years, that's what's been budgeted. The exciting thing about this program is we're the flagship port to start this kind of partnership cost-sharing program with communities, and subsequently a few ports have also adopted this program, ports of Tacoma, Olympia, and most recently Port of Port Angeles. They contacted me and they set up a similar program. So we provide some advice on the agreements and process we have in place. So since from 2004 through 2014, this is how much has been expended by the port towards these small city projects. In turn, we require the cities to provide a match towards their work, and you see they've matched in excess of what the port has spent. And in addition, about $19 million to date in capital projects have been leveraged. So the sheet I handed out to you, which I'll also post on the port webpage, shows about 42 projects since 2004 that we funded. Most have been completed. There were a few that just got started and they decided not to complete them, so the money wasn't spent. And in some cases, as you can see, we underspent what was committed. So what I'd like to go over now are a few examples in the communities of where projects have been assembled and some things have been completed. So in the city of Blaine, they had an airport in the city of Blaine for a number of years, and the city was going through a deliberative process about the future of that airport. So there was a feasibility study to look at alternative uses such as closing the airport, creating a business park, and we partnered in that project, and subsequently the city did decide to close the airport, and as a result they have an industrial, commercial redevelopment area, and we've been involved in some engineering work, including the extension of Boblet Road through there. And most recently, we're looked at market analyses for kinds of industry that'd be suitable for Blaine. And there's an overview of the Gateway Business Park. And you can see Boblet's the road that cuts through the middle there. You have a shopping center to the north, and there's about 20 acres of property that can be used. The city most recently has been engaged with a development team out of Canada to look at alternatives for use of the property. We've also, as port staff, been involved with the city on some business leads from Canada and other places to look at the site. So it's definitely a good resource for the community. A couple of businesses have cited in their Mercer Distribution, and TC Trading is an existing company that's benefited from this work. In the city of Everson, this is a really good example of helping one of our smallest communities to get necessary work done. So Mission Road, this is a map by their city engineer, but Mission Road serves the industrial area of South Everson and also Selco, which is our largest employer with about 130 employees. So we're involved in different phases of engineering and right-of-way analysis to allow the city to leverage funds for utility and roadway improvements that benefit Selco as well as the property to the south, which is about 90 acres. And some of the property owners are looking at making private investments. Tyra Construction, I think, owns some property down there, and they've made some investments. So over time, this will be a draw for the city to have this property available. And they were able to leverage EDI funds for the project, so we were pleased with that. City Sumas also does some good work up there. They have the heavy haul road that the port was initially involved in developing back in the 80s, and this allows Canadian overweight trucks to enter the United States and use the industrial site, some of the tenants we have there, and other industry that benefit from truck delivery. So some of the projects we've been involved mainly are improvements to that road and extension to Saco Forest Products, for example, and Cedar Prime. Another project was they're heavy industrial users there, so they looked at a feasibility for their substation, and they ultimately partnered with PSE to do a feeder line extension. So now they have a lot of megawatts serving that area, which is about 300 acres. When you look at the city of Sumas, I think it's the second smallest city, but they have the most industrial area. And this map is interesting because it shows basically the developable area available in Sumas. There's about 160 acres, including some of the port property. And Bob Mitchell Way comes down from the border crossing to where you see the Sumas Property LLC. And we're spending some time up Wednesday to check on some developments and what's going on with some of the property in Sumas. City of Linden. We've been involved with a retail trade study a number of years ago, look at gap analysis for capturing retail sales leakage, some improvements in Judson Plaza downtown, and recently involved with some road projects to help connect and access commercial property in Linden. And if you haven't been to Linden lately, there's a lot of things happening. You've got the Dutch Mill Village, which has a new owner, and they're reworking the windmill. And I guess there's a hotel room in there, and they've added some hotel rooms in that building, so that'll be in a development project that's nearing completion. The photo in your upper right, that's Riverview Road, and that's going to extend from Hannigan to the downtown, so we're partnered with some engineering work on that one. And the photo below was the Delft Square, which is now called the Wapples Mercantile Building, and that's a really exciting project because it finally came together, some local investors were able to pull the pins and get some work going. So if you drive through downtown, you'll see that building being redeveloped, and that also is going to have some hotel rooms. So they're going to be, I heard at the chamber, 50 units in downtown Linden. So hopefully they can fill those up and create some more retail activity. So I wanted to share those as examples where our partnership with the small cities have led to some work and some projects. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dodd, I just want to compliment you for your hard work with the partnership meetings that are monthly, and the small cities get together, as you well know, and that money available to match really gets a lot of projects started. You can see in our list of what's happened over the years. It's been really a positive step, and it's a good way to get the cities involved.
Well, thanks for your support of this program.
Commissioner McCullough? I also like this program. You know, the folks in Whatcom County that don't own a boat and don't use our airport say, what's the port do for me? And here are some really good examples, and I think it's a great program. Thank you for your efforts.
So for your consideration, and Diane read the motion, we have 4 projects we're bringing forward to you today for your consideration. I'll just go over those. City and Blaine, they are looking at a retail recruitment strategy, and this is tied to the development team they're working with and looking at the kind of a gap analysis similar to what Linden did a few years ago. This isn't saying that retail is their primary interest in Blaine. We're also looking at industrial, but this is something they think could be a helpful tool to look at, and they're matching more than we would be putting in. City of Everson's continuing phase 1 work of the Lincoln Street project. This would benefit, the 2 key employers are Nilatech and Criterion Athletic, that project. So, and Everson is very good at leveraging state and federal dollars, and I've been told a number of times that, but for the inclusion of the port money, it makes it harder to get those kinds of project dollars. The city of Ferndale is in the second phase of looking at an extension of Thornton Road to connect to I-5. Right now, if you get off there, 2nd Avenue, there's a roundabout, and it says Thornton Road. You really can't get to Thornton Road, but this is a significant project. I understand it's one of Ferndale's highest priorities. If they can get the engineering done and get the funding leveraged, it's about a $20 million project, I believe. Finally, City of Linden is looking at, if you drive north on the guide, there's Cock Road to your right and Baylin Road to your left, south of the Safeway there. There's about 20 acres of commercial property, and they want to look at a sewer sub-basin analysis to be ready for any development that would come in to provide hookups. So again, commercial activity for Linden. And once again with Linden, there's interest in industrial activity in West Linden. We've been working with the city on a project and hoping that moves forward.
Thank you, Dodd. Any comments?
No, thank you.
Nope.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dodd. Passes 3-0. And I think we have an additional item, do we, Diane?
We're actually going to have 3 additional items.
Okay.
I'll just briefly list them here to you. We're going to have John Hergersheimer is going to talk to you about a stormwater permit that came in today. It's a requirement that we just wanted your blessing for me to sign. It didn't make the agenda because we just learned about it. Frank Schmiller's going to talk about repealing a city ordinance that came to our attention late last week. I believe it was on Friday. And then I'm also going to talk to you about a letter of support for Carver Gym and Western Washington University. So we'll start with John Hergersheimer, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Again, John Hergesheimer, Senior Project Engineer. This request before you, it did come in literally at the last minute. It's for the Whatcom Waterway project. For the Whatcom Waterway cleanup project, we need to do a permit, a notice of intent, it's called, to Department of Ecology for issuing a general stormwater construction permit. And we normally do these notice of intents early, and then once we get the permit, then we actually transfer the permit to the contractor. Then the contractor then is responsible for operating and maintaining the stormwater cleanup levels and the best management practices and procedures in doing the project. And this one permit form, this ecology permit form, is one of the few that requires the executive director to sign the form. It's something that the engineering staff cannot sign this permit form. So this request before you today is to authorize the executive director to sign the notice of intent for the Whatcom Waterway Stormwater General Construction Permit application.
Thank you, John. Any questions, gentlemen? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A motion to approve resolution number 1339, Port Resolution number 1339, requesting that the City of Bellingham repeal the BMC Municipal Code Chapter 12.08 in its entirety.
Is your mic on? I'm sorry.
Pursuant to a port statute, RCW 53.08.220, it is possible for ports throughout the state to ask the local city or county to adopt port rules in the city or county's municipal code. And this has the effect of essentially criminalizing conduct. So a port could say if you speed on the port roads, it also could be a traffic misdemeanor, or a variety of things. Anyway, in 1978, the Port of Bellingham did this, and they amended it in the early 80s. and they adopted a bunch of the regulations from the Squalicum Harbor Rules and Regulations as part of this Bellingham Municipal Code 12.08. And when you read it, you get an insight into how the thinking was back in the 70s, because it's things like your dog has to be on a leash when it's on the floats, and you have to securely tie your vessel, and you have to keep things neat and orderly. And flash forward to 2015, there is a multi-party boathouse that wants to upgrade their electrical system, and they want to upgrade the amperage service in their boathouse from 20 amperes to 30 amperes, and the system will accept that. And as the city was doing research, they found this old adoption of harbor rules, and at the time it said the port's power is limited to 20 amps. And I think it was an expression of what the port could provide, not a limitation by the city. But in any way, we've talked to the city attorney. If you would approve this resolution today, the city will take it up on Monday and then take it up again their following meeting. It's a customer service issue. That's where we're bringing it on, because the boathouse owners want to get going. It's their boathouse. They want to rewire it, bring it up to a 30 amp capacity. The port owns the breaker. Once it's up to a 30 amp capacity, we'll replace a 20 amp breaker with a 30 amp breaker pursuant to the electrical permit. It's all done with the City of Bellingham electrical permit.
So what else is in there that we would be rescinding? I mean, is there, I have no problem rescinding the amperage.
All watercraft owners will comply with all directions and instructions issued by the harbor master. I'll just paraphrase these. You have a transfer privilege limited to 6 months if you pay your mortgage up in Blaine and you want to come down to Squalicum or vice versa. That's in the Bellingham City Code. Docks and floats designed for loading and unloading are reserved for that. You can't leave your boat there. You have to give us 15 days notice, advance written notice if you want to terminate your mortgage. That's in the Bellingham City Code. Floats and berths must be kept clean at all times. Watercraft must be securely moored. Sewage must not be discharged into Squalicum Harbor. Watercraft may be moved by the harbor master without the consent of the owner. The speed limit's 4 knots. The port can refuse right to terminate or refuse mortgage to any person they want. The port does not accept watercraft for storage as a warehouseman. There's an indemnification provision in there that's kind of interesting. It says that everybody will indemnify the port.
Basically, Frank, all of those are already covered in our rules and regs for our marinas. Is that correct?
Right. What this would do, and I don't know any ports that use it now, but what it would do is allow you to call the police to issue a ticket. And I checked with Dan Stahl, and I don't think we've called the police to issue a ticket in Bellingham in anybody's memory. Pets are not permitted on the floats, only if they're on a leash. So what's happened is, first of all, the port has rules and regs that it enforces. Secondly, some of these other things are now subject to federal or state law that is separate and apart from our rules and regs, like discharging into the water or seaworthy vessels or other things like that. So in any event, the one we want to specifically address is electrical power available in Squalicum Harbor will accommodate a maximum load of 20 amperes. Overtaxing a service will result in refusal of service. We think that was just an expression of capacity, but the city's electrical or building official said that's a limitation. I think Dan can tell you that since this ordinance has passed, the city's issued a bunch of building permits for electrical permits for 30 amp, 40, 50 amp service throughout the harbor, and the system's designed to hold that. So Dan described it as kind of a housekeeping issue, just to get rid of this thing. I don't know. You won't be able to call the police to enforce the port's rules and regs anymore, Dan.
Well, anytime we can eliminate a rule or reg, I'm all for it. So.
Hey, Frank, are we repealing the entire, are we asking the city to repeal the entire section 12.08? Because it's far more comprehensive than just the electrical portion, it seems to be creating a problem right now. I can't imagine the city wanting to let go all of this and
Well, they
see something replace it.
Yeah, 12.08010 is territorial jurisdiction, so it says Bellingham Harbor's in their jurisdiction. It's scope of this chapter. 12.08030 is enforcement, and then 12.08080 is all the regulations. So that, yeah, the whole thing is going to be repealed. So the city's not going to have a hand in.
Are they likely to ask for a replacement of this that's more relevant to 2015?
No, I think what happened was, I think they did this at the request of the port. The RCW 5308-220 says a port can request a city or a county to adopt their rules as their rules and thereby issue tickets for infractions and misdemeanors. So I think the city did it as a service to the port back in the day, and I don't think the port's ever utilized the service. So the city's happy just to get rid of it too and say, whatever the thought was back in 75 and 82 has left us at this point.
Well, I think part of it is most of it's covered in our regulations right now.
Yeah,
so.
we're already covering it. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, and Dan, as I understand this, the police have never been out to enforce our harbor rules. We've gone through numerous revisions to harbor rules and regs since. Every year. Yeah, so this was apparently the ones that were in existence at least as late as 1985. So at least 30 years ago.
We had someone on port property we had to call in Blaine. Well, I guess it's the city of Bellingham. Doesn't affect
Right.
Blaine, does it? Okay.
You know, if the port wanted to go through this and adopt a new set of enforcement regulations, we certainly could go to either Blaine or the city of Blaine or the city of Bellingham and ask them to do that if there was a need to enforce criminally some of the port's rules and regs. I defer to Mr. Stahl on that. Maybe, Dan, you want to address that? I had Mr. Stahl read them, and he said, get rid of them.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan Stahl, Maritime Director. I appreciate you entertaining a piece of new business today. This is an item that, as Frank mentioned, is a really important piece of customer service for people in the harbor that are looking to do these electrical repairs on these multi-party boathouses. They're doing exactly what we've asked them to do. Frank and I went through and read through the list this morning to see is there anything on that list that we would want to keep? And really the answer is no. And if you have material in the code that we're not using, and in some places is harmful, is preventing people from doing the right thing, my recommendation would be to take it out. Frank has talked with folks over at the city, and they're amenable to do that. So staff recommendation would be the resolution that is before you this afternoon.
So from a practical standpoint, if a guy's walking along the dock with his AK-47 and we need to call somebody, do we call the Bellingham police?
No, because that's legal. And I'm only saying that slightly tongue-in-cheek.
Let's say it wasn't legal. Would we?
Because he was pulling the trigger and rounds were coming out, then we would call it.
Well, Commissioner, if something is a violation of the state law or a city, or absent our regulations, if something is a violation of the law, the police will respond and apply the law. What this was kind of an unusual circumstance that allowed us to pass our regulations and then all of a sudden make it criminal to violate our regulations, which in today's day and age, I even tell you if someone was charged with this, it would be an interesting process to convict them, under this scenario. But that's correct. It is possible just to delete subpart P, which is the electrical, if you want to do that. But it will delay the process an additional 2 weeks because they have to start over. And the city said, look, we'll do whatever you want. It's your rules. It's not our rules. Dan Stahl's recommendation, my recommendation is we get rid of all of them because it's just a kind of a difficult thing.
So I've just read this super quickly, but the only thing I think the city might actually want to keep would be the reference to the city-owned docks, which they have an extensive set of docks, right? No, they don't have any docks. No. So, yeah, let's do this. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, if it's recommended by our Marine Director and also our legal staff and the city's in favor of it, I certainly am. All those in favor?
Say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Commissioners, the last item I want to discuss today is Western Washington University. As requested a letter of support, they've gone to the state with a capital project for the redoing of replacement of Carver Gym. It's a capital project of about $73 million. They've asked Mayor Linville and County Executive Laus to write a similar letter of support. I have a letter of support, but I wanted to make sure you didn't object to the port submitting that under mine or your signatures. The job would create about 750 jobs during the construction, and it would allow their educational department to, greater utilize the physical education part of the education.
There was some talk at one time about moving the gym and everything on our waterfront. This, of course, would make that null and void if they redid Carver Gym.
Well, I'm not so sure it would make an event center or some sort of a conference center null and void, but it would keep the educational program up on the campus. But I don't think they ever intended on moving the educational program down here. I think the talk was to have some place for the basketball teams to play their games and maybe house other community-wide events there.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that Carver Gym is a lot more than just a gym where the basketball teams play.
Absolutely.
And so that part of it would be all redone, and they could still move onto our property.
I believe this is more for their educational program and those credentials than it is for basketball teams.
Well, I'm in favor of it.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
No, not really.
Hearing none other, all those in favor?
Sure. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I think, is there any new business?
Got a couple of things, if I may. Do you have anything?
We got
in front of?
all the agenda items, Diane, taken care of? Yes, go ahead.
So I had a conversation with Jack Weiss, City Councilman for City of Bellingham, a few days ago, and he asked me to bring this up with you folks. There is apparently an effort to extend the off-leash area from the park on Squalicum Parkway, which has apparently a very well-used off-leash area, but extend it down a trail that goes down to the waterfront and then would eventually connect up with part of the beach that's in our control. And he asked that I bring this to your attention and that we entertain the concept of having our beach off-leash as well, which currently I don't think it's an off-leash area. So I'd like to see if we can't just see what that would entail and what we would need to do about that.
You're talking about the beach and the end of Seaview there by Mount Baker Plywood? Is that the beach?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't see really how it connects, and we didn't have a map to take a look at it closely, but
There's a bike lane that goes along Squalicum Parkway. There is not one along Seaview, but that's obviously not as heavy use of a road and a slower speed limit and has enough potholes in it that you can't drive very fast through there.
it's called traffic calming.
Traffic
It's a
calming.
reverse speed bump. Yes. Anyway, so if we can take a look at that and see what it would take, and then we'll bring it to the commission, we can see if we want to support that or not. And then also the Patton Creek shoreline, the estuary. Brian, are you familiar with what happened there? There's a little, who did that? That wasn't us, right? That was the city that did that?
Right, that was,
Yeah, I just wanted a little shout out. Hello, city. Thank you very much for
yeah, that
doing
was the
that.
City of Bellingham project. It was supported by the Bellingham Bay Action Team, though, so which the Port and Department of Ecology are co-managers of. So
Yeah,
it was a
it looks
project that was-
fantastic. If folks haven't seen it, it's a really nice adjustment to the shoreline for a little remediation. So
Yep.
I was excited to see that done. So just want to say thank you to the city for that.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
Anything else, Commissioner Jorgensen? Hearing none other, the commission meeting is closed. Thank you.